जय ओम विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजकाचार्य स्तोत्र सत श्री श्रीमद अभयनारविंद भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय। विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजकाचार्य स्तोत्र सत श्री श्रीमद भक्ति सिद्धांत सरस्वती गोस्वामी महाराज श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय। अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय। श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय। Gaura Premanande, Hari Hari Bol. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya. I'll cast. Yeah. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, titled Cosmic Manifestation, Chapter 6, titled Purusha Sukta, confirmed, text 29. Tataha te bhrataraha ime prajanam patayaha nava ayajan vyaktam avyaktam Purusham susamahitaha. Tataste bhratara ime. Tataste bhratara ime. Prajanam patayo nava. Prajanam patayo nava. Ayajan vyaktam avyaktam. Ayajan vyaktam avyaktam. Purusham susamahitaha. Purusham susamahitaha. Tataste bhratara ime. Prajanam patayo nava. Ayajan vyaktam avyaktam. Purusham susamahitaha. Tataste bhratara ime. Prajanam patayo nava. Ayajan vyaktam avyaktam. Purusham susamahitaha. No. I'll do this. Tataste bhratara ime. Janam patayo nava. Ayajan vyaktam avyaktam. Purusham susamahitaha. Matajis. Tataste bhratarai me prajanam patayo nava ayajan vyaktam avyaktam purusham su samahitaha. Okay. There is a line that repeats from text 27 and 28. So, looking at that line, there's a particular word, the exact same word, Purusha Vayavair. So, looking at that word, I somehow got mixed up and I thought we had already finished 28. I didn't read the purport. So, we're going to be doing text 28. Anyways, I'll read the translation here and then I'm going to go, and I'll just chant text 28 and read the purport. Iti sambhrita sambhara purusha vayavairaham tameva purusham yajñam tenaivayajam ishwaram. Ooh, I didn't read. Okay, I'll read both translations now that I've read both verses. Thus I created the ingredients and paraphernalia for offering sacrifice out of the parts of the body of the Supreme Lord, the enjoyer of the sacrifice, and I perform the sacrifice to satisfy the Lord. There's no audio coming. The live is not going to be able to hear what I'm saying. Should I wait? Hare Krishna. Okay. Thus I created the ingredients and paraphernalia for offering sacrifice out of the parts of the body of the Supreme Lord, the enjoyer of the sacrifice, and I perform the sacrifice to satisfy the Lord. Purport. People in general are always anxious to have peace of mind or peace in the world, but they do not know how to achieve such a standard of peace in the world. Such peace in the world is obtainable by performances of sacrifice and by practice of austerity. In the Bhagavad Gita 5.29, the following prescription is recommended. Bhoktaram yajyatapasam sarvaloka maheshwaram suhridam sarvabhutanam nyatva mam shantim richati. The Karma Yogis know that the Supreme Lord is the factual enjoyer and maintainer of all sacrifices and of the austere life. They also know that the Lord is the ultimate protector of all the planets and is the factual friend of all living entities. Such knowledge gradually converts the Karma Yogis into pure devotees of the Lord through the association of unalloyed devotees, and thus they are able to be liberated from material bondage. Brahma, the original living being within the material world, taught us the way of sacrifice. The word sacrifice suggests dedication of one's own interest for the satisfaction of a second person. That is the way of all activities. Every man is engaged in sacrificing his interest for others, either in the form of family, society, community, country, or the entire human society. But perfection of such sacrifices is attained when they are performed for the sake of the Supreme Person, the Lord. Because the Lord is the proprietor of everything, because the Lord is the friend of all living creatures, and because He is the maintainer of the performer of sacrifice, as well as the supplier of the ingredients of sacrifice, it is He only and no one else who should be satisfied by all sacrifices. The whole world is engaged in sacrificing energy for advancement of learning, social upliftment, economic development, and plans for total improvement of the human condition, but no one is interested in sacrificing for the sake of the Lord, as is advised in the Bhagavad Gita. Therefore, there is no peace in the world. If men at all want peace in the world, they must practice sacrifice in the interest of the Supreme Proprietor and friend of all. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Utaf Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagarjatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadhvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalitha Shri Vishakhan Vitamscha. He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatrubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And just because we chanted the verse, I'll just read the translation of the next verse, which will be discussed tomorrow. My dear son, thereafter your 9 brothers, who are the masters of living creatures, performed the sacrifice with proper rituals to satisfy both the manifested and non-manifested personalities. Okay. So, I did not prepare for this verse. I prepared for the next verse, but I pray to my spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada, Krishna, and all the assembled Vaishnavas that I may speak something relevant to this topic and pleasing to the Acharyas. So here, Prabhupada in this purport, I've actually referred to this purport in the past. In this purport, Srila Prabhupada gives a definition for the word sacrifice, and that's where the thrust of this purport is, because here at this point of time, Brahma is describing in the Purusha Sukta prayers, or in this particular set of prayers here, which is confirming the Purusha Sukta prayers, about the first sacrifice that he performed, and how sacrifice now becomes a way, and sacrifice becomes the way of satisfying the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That there is no way to satisfy God without performing sacrifice. This is an extremely important understanding that is literally found only in the Vedas. It is not by just that. The point is that while the Vedic texts speak of glorification, right? We also speak of to glorify Krishna. And the Christians also say one must praise the Lord, etc. It is literally only in the Vedic texts that we find that actually all of this constitutes what is called a sacrifice. All of that constitutes what is sacrifice. And that's not very clearly understood, because generally, when we hear the word sacrifice, at least those who are unaware of such a broad definition of sacrifice, we would generally think sacrifice means something animal sacrifice, or something like this. Maybe there's some fire, there's something that's being sacrificed. That's the general conception. So, Prabhupada begins the purport by saying that people in general are always anxious to have peace of mind or peace in the world. And but they do not know how to achieve such a standard of peace. And Prabhupada goes right there in the purport. He says, such peace in the world is obtainable by performance of sacrifice and by practice of austerity. Right? So you have two things over here. How to achieve peace in the world? By performing sacrifice and by performance of austerity. This is important because sometimes, even even within our devotional life, sometimes we may find that we lack peace. Then we have to look at these two things. Are we engaging in sacrifice, and are we performing austerity? Because this is the way in which, and why is that so? Because even Brahma was not peaceful until he actually began to create, until he received darshan of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, until he received instructions on how to create. He didn't know what to do. Brahma was confused. He was perturbed. He was disturbed. Therefore, he had to perform sacrifice. And if you see, Krishna refers to similar things in the Bhagavad Gita. He speaks of austerity and he also speaks of sacrifice in the Bhagavad Gita. Why? Because Arjuna was confused. Arjuna was lacking peace. What is that verse? Arjuna says that my mind is perturbed, disturbed. It comes in the second chapter. And then he says, Shishyasteham shadi mam tvam prapannam. Karpanya dosho bahatasva bhavat prachami tvam dharma sammuda chetaha Yet shreyasya nishchitan bruhitan me shishyasteham shadimam tvam prapannam. He says that, Arjuna says that karpanya dosha bahata swabhavat, that by my own nature and by weakness of heart, karpanya dosha, by affection, and being afflicted by affection for my relatives and friends, and being completely confused. Prichami tvam dharma sammuda chetaha. I am confused. I'm in dharma sammuda. I'm in a situation where I do not understand what is dharma, what needs to be done, what is righteous, what needs to be done and what should not be done. Dharma sammuda cheta. And he clarifies that even more. Yet shreyasya nishitan bruhitan me. I am not able to determine what is best for me at this point of time. You can sum this all up as being saying is he's not peaceful. How can you be peaceful if you're like this? It's impossible. You don't know what to do. You're confused. Arjuna is able to identify that he's in a situation where, although he's trying to think logically and through reason and this and that, he recognizes that he is being afflicted also by affection. And the truth is, he's completely confused. Arjuna is come to, I am completely confused. I don't know what to do. And I don't know what is best for me. So what am I going to do? I'm going to throw myself at your lotus feet, Krishna. So this is what Arjuna does. And what is that? What is that throwing? That throwing is a sacrifice. It is a sacrifice that Arjuna executed. Shishyasteham shadimam tvam prapannam. Prapannam literally means surrender. Is another word of surrender. Sharanagati, prapanna, prapati. Shishyasteham. That I now offer myself as a disciple at your lotus feet. And Arjuna makes that sacrifice. And in the performance of sacrifice, within the performance of sacrifice, automatically there is like, it's built in, austerity is built in. Because what was Krishna's next statement? What did Krishna say to Arjuna? Yeah. So, he calls him a eunuch, right? I'm also, because I didn't prepare, so I didn't even look it up, and now I'm all fuzzy about my verses here. So, he says that you speak like a big pundit, but asocyan anvasochastvam pragyavadam sabhasase gatasum gatasumscha nanu sochanti panditaha. Oh, you think you're some great learned pandit. Immediately he was put into austerity. It's not that, oh, you've surrendered, now I'll keep things sweet for you. No, but the thing is, when the process of sacrifice happens, there is austerity built in right there. The austerity, he had to hear things that were really unpleasant. He had asochan anvasochastvam pragyavadam sabhasase. Oh, you think you're some great pandit? Because actually Arjuna makes really good arguments in the past. And somebody could even get proud. Actually, these are pretty good arguments here. I got a really strong case. I'm making a good case here. But then Krishna just blasts him. He just blasts him to bits. He's just like, and why? What is the austerity? It is not that Krishna picked out his arguments and then said, now do you understand how you're a fool? No, first he called him a fool. That hurts the ego really hard. Because here you are taking all this effort to present all this reasoning and argument, and your spiritual master comes and says, you're just a fool. And you're like, you want to explain, you want this, that, but Arjuna had to sit through and listen to that. He couldn't just turn his back and walk away. He's like, I'm done with you. No. The disciple has to take an ego bashing from the spiritual master. And it's a tough one. It's a really tough one. It's very difficult. Because if you think by logic and reasoning, you could say, why can't Krishna just explain everything before and then call him a fool? Why did he have to do it like this? But then where is the question of surrender? If if ultimately the spiritual master has to um, tiptoe according to your ego, then where have you surrendered? If he has to tiptoe around you, oh, he can't handle this, he can handle this, then where is the question of surrender? Then ultimately, what takes paramount importance is not the words of the spiritual master. What takes paramount importance in that scenario is your ego. Of course, um, you know, um, if we are to be given treatment like Arjuna, we probably won't even come to Krishna consciousness. Srila Prabhupada and the Acharyas are merciful, but still the principle remains that after some point of time, we just cannot understand everything. We cannot understand everything, and we have to follow instruction. We can't. And actually, this was kind of like the subject of the next verse, but Srila Prabhupada, he states in the next purport, in the following purport, that he says that they should see through the pages of authentic scriptures and should not simply believe their unqualified eyes. That's hard, and that's in reference to the existence of the demigods. You can't see them, but you got to believe they exist. And what happens is, we start getting introduced to so many things in Krishna consciousness that we cannot see. And you have to have faith. But that faith is not meant to be blind, because within that faith is backed up by transcendental knowledge. And that transcendental knowledge is based on Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, which presents things to us in a very logical way. There are a lot of things that we can understand in a very logical way. But after that, there comes a time where we need to surrender. And that surrender is a sacrifice. That surrender, and here actually Srila Prabhupada, I don't know if you all noticed, here Prabhupada gives a very different translation to Bhoktaram Yajnatapasam. What is the translation in Bhagavad Gita? So if you look here, this is the same verse, Bhagavad Gita. Bhoktaram Yajnatapasam sarvaloka maheshwaram suhridam sarvabhutanam nyatva mamam shantim richati. A person in full consciousness of me, knowing me to be the ultimate beneficiary of all sacrifices and austerities, and the Supreme Lord of all planets and demigods, the benefactor and well-wisher of all living entities, attains peace from the pangs of material miseries. Pretty straightforward translation, right? But how is Srila Prabhupada describing it here? He says, the karma yogis know that the Supreme Lord is the factual enjoyer and maintainer of all sacrifices and of the austere life. Note, Supreme Lord maintains the process of sacrifice. He could do things differently. Sometimes you wonder, why am I being forced to surrender like this? It's because Krishna maintains it that way. He maintains it that way. He maintains that process. There's somebody who shouldn't be in the Bhagavatam class. It's called a cockroach. Somebody can take the brave task of catching it. It's really fast. Okay. Hare Krishna. So, Supreme Lord maintains sacrifice, and he also maintains, here what does it say? And of the austere life. He maintains the austere life. So, it's Supreme Lord who maintains austerity, it's Supreme Lord who maintains sacrifice. Sure, if he wants us to just dance our way, enjoy our way back, he could do it. He's Supreme Lord. He could do it, but he's not doing it. He maintains the way of sacrifice. Why? And of austere life. Why? Because not only is he the maintainer, here's a word here. He's the factual enjoyer. He enjoys the sacrifice and austerity performed by the living entities. How do you understand that? So God likes to see us all suffer. Krishna likes to see us all suffer and sacrifice and sweat and blood and tears and all that. How do you understand that? What does it mean that he is the factual enjoyer? How do we understand that? Yeah. Okay. Why does Krishna have to have pleasure that the living entity is giving up something? Isn't that narcissistic? Okay. Huh? The point is the love. It's the love. Sometimes we like to see that. We like to see that amongst people we love too. That um, we like to see that people who love us, we expect them to make some sacrifice for us. We expect them to show up for us. We expect them to to sacrifice some of their interest for our sake. Although it goes both ways, of course, but there is that expectation, is it not? And 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 that is the point, because love cannot exist without some performance of sacrifice and some performance of austerity. If a mother is thinking that I'm only going to raise my child if the child passes stool exactly at the time I want it to pass stool, then where is the love? Where is the love? It doesn't exist. But the mother has to go through so much austerity to care for the child. And she has to sacrifice. She has to sacrifice. The thing wakes up at night and screams. And you can't do anything about it. And the father and the mother, they have to stay up, they have to pacify. Where is the question of love? And and the same thing happens when the child grows up. When the parents are old and they are in need, it is the child's duty to do the same thing. It is the son and the children have to take care of their parents when they are old and unable to care for themselves. This is Vedic culture, this is dharma. And there is sacrifice, because everybody, it's not that only in this particular time in history we all have something going on and we're unable to go and care for our parents. Every time, in every place, in every circumstance, people are living their lives, and nobody's living their life saying that, okay, actually, I've allocated like so many years of my life in case my parents are falling sick, I'm going to go. No, you have to stop things and you have to go. And probably things that you wanted to do is not going to happen. You might have to give up some things or whatever, make some adjustments, things that you wouldn't like to do. But if you don't do that, then where is the question of love? The same principle, now that's all based on the bodily concept of life, ultimately. The same principle holds in terms of Krishna consciousness. In fact, we cannot live our life. We will be extremely dissatisfied. This is the whole point, that without sacrifice and austerity, we cannot be happy. And the world cannot be a happy or peaceful place. Although people are generally inclined to think that I don't want to perform sacrifice and I don't want to live an austere life. I don't want to perform any austerity. I want to be very comfortable and I want everything to happen the way I want it to happen. I don't want to sacrifice anything. I want to get everything. I don't want to sacrifice anything, and I absolutely don't want to be in any position of discomfort, even voluntary. And then I'm going to be happy and I'm going to be peaceful. But they cannot be happy and peaceful, because their mind will remain disturbed. The mind is controlled by such sacrifice and austerity. Because the nature of sacrifice and austerity is that it absorbs the mind. It absorbs the mind. Because through that sacrifice and austerity comes love. When love comes, the mind is subdued. Then automatically one is able to tolerate pain and pleasure, happiness, distress, heat, cold, all these kind of things. Automatically it happens. The thing is, we end up doing this momentarily in our lives in different phases based on the bodily conception of life. A parent may do it for their children. The lover may do it for his beloved. You know, the friend does it for his, best friend. And in this way, the philanthropist may do it for the good of the world. But these phases don't last, because such sacrifice and austerity are performed without transcendental knowledge. They are performed without connection with Krishna. And therefore they are not eternal, they are temporary. And because they are temporary, even though some sacrifice and austerity was performed, even though in some cases there was an attempt to be genuine in love, it all ends up as being it ends up as being nothing. And it gets swept away in the waves of time. By the waves of time. Just gets swept away because things are temporary in the material world. I saw one picture of this is in so if you know a little bit about Irish and British history, the Irish and British were opposed to each other because the Irish were Catholics and the British are Protestants. So anyways, the point is, if you are a Protestant, at least back then, if you are a Protestant, you can't marry a Catholic. You're supposed to hate them. And if you're a Catholic, you're supposed to hate the Protestants. And they would fight wars, and this was the whole thing going on. And so there's a grave of two lovers in somewhere in Ireland, where one is, probably the man or the woman is Protestant and the other is Catholic. And so they were not allowed to be buried together. So what did they do? They were buried on either side of a wall, and then their tombstones rise up above the grave, and then there's a hand that comes out and holds each, holds the other hand coming from the other tombstone, as a sign of their undying love that is above all these, these stupid restrictions that people have put in place or whatever. It is the sign of unbreaking and pure love that has whatever. They're poetic people. I'm not so poetic, so I don't know. Poetic people can come up with these fancy words. And it's like you look at that and it's like, wow, but the both of them are dead and gone, and they don't even know who each other are right now. And if you understand Shastra, I mean, it's like, it's all like nice and fruity and beautiful to think about, but the fact is, they're literally dead and gone. And they don't know each other right now. And the whole thing doesn't exist. It is literally stone. It is just stone. That's it. There is no difference between that tombstone going up and the wall right underneath it. There is no difference. It is absolutely no difference. All that difference is conjured up in our heads. So while this rosy opinion of love and peace, and finally, the lovers were able to attain each other's embrace in after whatever life or whatever God they want to say, it's like, but none of that actually happened. None of that exists. None of that is true. And if you, at least whether you're scientific or not, I mean, it's not true. That's it. But therefore, the sacrifice and austerity is something that we execute. And Srila Prabhupada is making that point here. So Prabhupada continues in this translation. He says, they also know that the Lord is the ultimate proprietor of all the planets and is the factual friend of all living entities. Such knowledge gradually converts the karma yogis into pure devotees of the Lord through the association of unalloyed devotees, and thus they are able to be liberated from material bondage. It's pretty amazing. Prabhupada gives a different meaning here to that verse. explaining how the karma yogis, they actually become bhakti yogis. They become devotees of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. How? Because such knowledge, knowledge of what? That actually the Supreme Lord is the maintainer and enjoyer of sacrifice and austerity. He is also the proprietor of all the planets and is the factual friend. He is the real friend, not anybody else. I'm thinking, if I actually think somebody understands me, somebody knows me, somebody actually loves me, that is Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. Full stop. Of course, his unalloyed pure devotees, but the point here is Krishna. That we're specifically speaking about this verse. So Krishna is the actual friend of all living entities, and that knowledge converts the karma yogis into pure devotees of the Lord. Why? Because the karma yogis were previously engaged in karma. And what does Krishna say in Bhagavad Gita about karma? Yajnatat karmano nyantra lokoyam karma bandhanaha tadartam karma kaunteya mukta sangha samachara. He says that yajnatat karmano nyantra, that karma must be performed, duty, occupation must be performed for what? For what? Yajnatat. Prabhupada, of course, in his purport, he in his verse, interestingly, he translates yajnatat as for the pleasure of Vishnu. But yajna refers to sacrifice. For the sake of sacrifice, one must perform one's duty. So, karma yogis understand that performance of duty is sacrifice. Because you have to perform duty according to Shastra, whether you like it or not, and that is sacrifice, because that is the surrender. But they perform all of those things for what? For material benefit. Because they want, ultimately, the karma yogis are still attached to enjoying material benefits. They are still attached to performing karma because of attachment for karma. And they may also be somewhat attached to the results or something like this. So, those karma yogis get converted into pure devotees when they understand that it's not actually the karma, because there's so much emphasis on performance of duty. Oh, no, you should do this, you should do this, you should do this. But they understand the purpose of it. They forget about the goal of everything. Why am I performing all these duties? Why all these rules and regulations? Why all these things? They forget that. But when they understand, or they don't know. Now, when they understand that Supreme Lord is the maintainer and enjoyer of the sacrifices and austerities that they are performing in the name of their karma, duty, and they understand that Supreme Lord is the actual proprietor. I don't possess anything. I may perform karma yoga, actually, but I don't possess anything. And the Supreme Lord is the friend of all living entities, then they surrender unto Him. And because that knowledge converts the karma yogis into pure devotees of the Lord. How? That knowledge will not come by its own. It comes through the association of the unalloyed pure devotees. Because it is the pure devotees who explain this to them. Who not only explain, by their personal example, they demonstrate. Because even though one may be a karma yogi, and one has achieved more peace than not being a karma yogi, still one has not achieved complete peace. Therefore, this verse is speaking about Jnatva mam shantim richati. Because the karma yogis are not peaceful. Because Krishna is saying that only one who worships him is peaceful. Huh? Yeah. Bhukti mukti siddhi kami sakale ashanta Krishna bhakti nishkama atayeva shanta. That nishkama, because he is free of material desires. Karma yogis still have material desires. There is no question of peace. Because they have not understood who is the maintainer and enjoyer of sacrifices and austerities. They still want to perform sacrifice and austerity with some material motivation. But when they come into the association of unalloyed devotees, they get inspired by those unalloyed devotees. And by their mercy, by listening and obtaining transcendental knowledge in their association, they're able to get liberated from material bondage and achieve peace. So Prabhupada continues here in the purport. He says that Brahma taught us the way of sacrifice. The word sacrifice suggests dedication of one's own interest for the sacrifice of a second person. That is the way of all activities. Every man is engaged in sacrificing his interest for others, either in the form of family, society, community, country, or the entire human society. But perfection of sacrifices are attained when they are performed for the sake of the Supreme Person, the Lord. So sacrifice is not something only where there is a literal fire that is there and there are offerings put into it. Sacrifice, Prabhupada explains here, at the root of everything means that one is sacrificing one's interest for the sake of another person. But in this case, the sacrifice becomes for the sake of the personality of Godhead. Now, the difference between those who are pious followers of Vedic culture and those who are impious is that they execute karma in accordance to what is stated in the Vedic scripture, so automatically they are engaged in sacrifice without their knowledge. Because that sacrifice is pleasing to Krishna, even though it is not performed with the motivation of pleasing Krishna, it gives them more peace and definitely more prosperity than people who do not perform such sacrifice. And this is why the Western worlds are considered to be in ignorance, because there is no idea. Even though they may think of this word sacrifice, or even if they may logically understand what sacrifice means, because they do not have faith in Shastra, they have not accepted the words of Krishna in Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, therefore they are impious, because what they are performing is based on mental concoction, manorathena. And it is influenced by the modes of passion and ignorance, because there is no real knowledge. There is not much real knowledge of God. There is not much real knowledge of this material world. There is neither knowledge of duties that have to be performed, nor is there knowledge of the nature of the soul. So because of this, they are basically considered Dvipada Pashu. They are considered like animals, because animals also do not have any idea. And animals are not required to perform sacrifice. Animals don't have to perform any sacrifice. But humans are. And when humans do not perform sacrifice, they simply become sinful. Therefore Krishna says, Yajnatat karmano nyantar lokoyam karma bandhanaha. That without performance of the karma, yajna sacrifice must be performed. Otherwise, it will result in bondage. So this word sacrifice is extremely important. That, we see, because we are very fallen in the age of Kali, we are not being forced by our acharyas to stick to the rigid principles of Vedic Varnashrama Dharma, the very strict rules and regulations. Rather, our acharyas are teaching us the path of understanding the purpose of all activities, and then through that purpose change our motivation, and that way make our whole life a sacrifice. And if we do not maintain that pure motivation in Krishna consciousness, then because we do not know the way of, because we are not actually, we are very impious, and we are unaware of the Vedic rules and regulations, we do not have the capacity to follow them, nor do we have the inclination to do so. And what happens when we don't have proper motivation? Then what happens? Immediately our that devotional service becomes watered down, and we become subject to the impious activities that we were born with. And therefore, for us especially, I like this word Mahotsa uses, Kali Yuga rejects. I don't know where it came from though, but he often uses this word. For us, Kali Yuga rejects, if we don't take up to Krishna consciousness seriously, what ends up happening is a very degraded mix of being somewhat Krishna conscious and then being like also having characteristics of these two-legged animals that roam outside the street, on the street, and outside here in society. And you have this very degraded mix, which otherwise in the Vedic culture that mix is rare. It doesn't happen because there is piety and you will not act in that way. And so what happens, we end up committing, even while we are trying to be devotees, we end up committing very gross sinful activities. And because of these sinful activities, we suffer greatly. We suffer greatly, even though on the side we may also be chanting little Hare Krishna. Because we are performing gross sinful activities, we are suffering like anything. And we don't have peace. We are disturbed. Manda sumanda matayo manda bhagya upadritaha. Upadritaha means being very disturbed. And unless we sacrifice, surrender, here in this case, you can make that word equivalent to surrender. And we accept some austerity, meaning the austerity that we have to accept, Prabhupada describes as the 4 regulative principles. Right? No meat eating, no illicit sex, no intoxication, no gambling. And we have to perform the austerity of becoming a disciple of our spiritual master, being disciplined. This is an austerity, to be disciplined by the spiritual master, which means you have to follow his instructions. It's not easy. It is not easy. But that austerity we have to perform. Otherwise, we cannot be peaceful. We have to come to terms with our conditioning. And our conditioning is such that we will never be peaceful. It is impossible for the activities that we have done and we are capable of doing, for what are modes of, it's so much mode of ignorance mixed with this explosive blast of passion, that just like completely just, we are so good at ruining our lives. And so it's really important here that we understand that the perfection of such sacrifices is attained when they are performed for the sake of the Supreme Person, the Lord. Because the Lord is the proprietor of everything, because the Lord is the friend of all living entities, as well as the supplier of the ingredients of sacrifice, it is He only and no one else who should be satisfied by all sacrifices. One devotee was saying, generally we understand who is to be served, and then means you understand that Krishna is to be served, and then you develop an attitude of servitude. But what we are trying to teach people is, first we want to teach people how to become a servant, then we'll introduce Krishna. It doesn't happen like that. You are so foolish, you're supposed to be a preacher, but actually you're such a big fool that you don't understand that people are already servants. They're already servants. They're servants of their senses. They're servants of their mind. They're servants of their friends, family, relatives, society, country, and they are miserable. You don't have to teach them. They are servants already. You have to reveal to them that they are servants. They are servants who are roaming around thinking that they are enjoyers. They are mentally deranged. Because while they are thinking they are the enjoyer, actually what they are is they are the sufferers. But they think they are enjoying. So it's an aspect of craziness that has to be taught to them. The preachers like this, all these misconceptions come from the misunderstanding that bhakti is some alien process that has to be taught to people, and that Western people or this and that cannot understand. Prabhupada was never, he was fully convinced that this devotional service, Sanatana Dharma, is not an artificial imposition. Prabhupada, in that tape where he describes the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, he says, this is not an artificial imposition on the mind. This chanting, Prabhupada says, is not an artificial imposition. What all of us were all chanting before we came to Krishna consciousness, what is Prabhupada saying? It's not an artificial imposition. We obviously were not chanting. But the point is, we were chanting so many other things without realizing that we were chanting. And now we are expected to chant Krishna's name and Krishna's glories. But previously we are chanting about so many other things. So it is not an artificial imposition, and this has to be revealed to us. This has to be taught to us. This is what is called spiritual master. Om Ajnana Timirandhasya. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, and my spiritual master opened my eyes with the torch of knowledge. I offer my respectful obeisances unto him. So this is spiritual master. He reveals it to us. And if preachers who are supposed to represent the spiritual master are speaking such nonsense, that means they themselves have not understood devotional service. They have not accepted, they have not learned actually from a spiritual master. They have not surrendered to a spiritual master. Or whoever they call as a spiritual master is either has not taught them and is not bona fide, and therefore they have a wrong understanding. Either they have not accepted the understanding, or their spiritual master is not a bona fide spiritual master. Because how can you come up with these wrong ideas? We'll first teach people how to be a servant, and what do they mean? They go and mean, oh, we'll take everybody and pick the trash on the on the beach. We'll teach them sacrifice. We'll teach them austerity. What we'll do, we'll go and pick the trash on the street. We'll do eye camps. We'll do this. We'll do that. They are sacrificing and they are performing austerity. But without Krishna, it's a complete waste. People are doing that already, and you, in the name of preaching, are doing more of it. And you are thinking that this is somehow spiritual. But what you are is, at least people, previously they were doing all of these things without thinking it is spiritual. Now you have given them the misconception that this is spiritual and taken them away further from Krishna consciousness. So this is called Jiva Himsa. This is violence. So therefore, it is important. We have to state, although people will come and say, why don't you feed this? Why don't you do that? Why are you doing this? You're all just interested in propagating your own religion. It's like, and this and that. But we have to be fully convinced that we are performing sacrifice for the pleasure of Vishnu. You are all performing sacrifice, but you are performing it for your own pleasure, and it's not giving you any pleasure. And we have come here to demonstrate that by performance, but we are happy and you are not. That is proof positive that if you perform sacrifice to Krishna, you will become happy. We are telling the whole world to do this so that the whole world can become happy and peaceful. As Prabhupada is saying that here. He's saying the whole world is engaged in sacrificing energy for the advancement of learning, social upliftment, economic development, and plans for total improvement of human condition, but no one is interested in sacrificing for the sake of the Lord, as it is advised in the Bhagavad Gita. Therefore, there is no peace in the world. If men at all want peace in the world, they must practice sacrifice in the interest of the Supreme Proprietor and friend of all. People think they make very smart arguments. They say, why are you pouring milk on the deity? What a waste of milk. You can feed four poor children like this with milk. Nonsense fellow, doesn't understand anything. Where is milk supplied from? It has to be offered to Krishna. Therefore, it is poured on the deity. You go and offer they don't understand that, okay, today you can go and feed 4 children milk, but who will feed them tomorrow? Who will feed them day after? Who will feed them in their next life? That and all, you don't have any conception. You don't have a concept. You don't understand what is birth, death, what is nature of soul. All this you are not interested in. Simply making whimsical, stupid arguments. Okay, you know what? There's so many people in this world who live without drinking milk. So what you do, instead of drinking milk, tomorrow, from every day you buy milk and you donate. Will you do that? You won't do. You'll simply talk. It's all talk. And even if they do, how much can they do? There'll always be some criticism. There's always something lacking. And that lacking is created because Krishna is not in the center of this world. But they think that because they are the enjoyer and they are the proprietor, we have to supply that milk to. But a devotee is in no illusion. If somebody is meant to get milk, they're going to get it. It is not that we have to go and donate and give. It is not like that. Of course, we distribute prasadam, and it is not that when we see a hungry person, if we have prasadam, we must give. It is not that devotees are heartless, But at the same time, devotees do not think that, oh, I'm giving to Krishna, it's wasted. That is the problem. The problem is we are not against giving for poor children some milk. But the problem is you are saying that giving to Krishna is a waste. Therefore, you are a rascal. So rascals like this can never bring about peace in the human society. Prabhupada concludes that, say, if men at all want peace in this world, they must practice sacrifice in the interest of the supreme proprietor and friend of all. So I'll stop here. If there are any questions or comments, please feel free to ask. Yes, Prabhu.
The verse which you are telling that Krishna says, Arjuna, that you are important, it is Asachanam.
Yeah, that's not that verse. That's not that verse. That's correct.
Klaibyam
masmagam partha naitatvai upapadyate. Yeah. No, yeah, I got mixed up. No, I got mixed up. Yeah. Thank you. Yes?
Going back to the point you were talking about sacrifices for your parents, I was wondering where you draw the line for sacrifices for your family and sacrifices for Krishna. Because more likely you'd want to just sacrifice everything for Krishna, but at the same time you have your family, so I'm kind of just trying to see like where the line would be drawn.
So the principle is that one must do these activities, such as these dharmic activities of taking care of one's parents, etc., etc. All this in a manner that it does not affect one's Krishna consciousness, but actually helps one advance in Krishna consciousness. And therefore, this must be performed under guidance. Because what happens is, we have to understand that we have affection for them. And we also have to understand that this affection is the cause of our material bondage too. But at the same time, a devotee of Krishna is expected to be detached, not averse. This is the other side of attachment, is aversion. And generally when devotees come into Krishna consciousness, at least I will say for myself, for instance, when I joined Krishna consciousness, I didn't want to talk to my parents. Because I was afraid. If I talk to them, I'm going to fall down. I'm going to leave and I'm going to go back, because they want me to come back. They don't want me to do this. So I'm going to go back. So, I swung the pendulum on the other side. But, and I thought, I can cut it off, anyways, you can philosophically understand that. Well, it's like this. And, ultimately we understand that Krishna is the proprietor of everything. He is supplying all necessities. So my parents will be supplied with all needs if they are meant to get all the needs. If they are not meant to get all the needs, even if I'm there, nothing can happen. Okay, we can say all this. And I said all that. But I was miserable. Because it's not that I can just suddenly give up attachment to my parents either. So it took me some while to understand how to, and of course this is with guidance, with devotees. They'll say, no, you talk to your parents, keep in touch with them, see how they're doing. But if you're talking to them every day, maybe that's too much. If you visit them this many times, it's too much. You can visit them. You can, and when you go there, show some love. Don't be like, actually you're not my mother, I'm not your son, we're not these bodies, and this and that. No, like, when the devotee goes, you can cook for your parents, you can cook something nice. Anyways, you have to take prasadam, so you're not going to get it there. You might as well cook. And they won't eat the things that you generally eat at the temple. So you can cook and offer and give it to them. And they'll take that as a sign of love and affection. It helps them advance in Krishna consciousness, helps you maintain your Krishna consciousness by not eating karmic grains. And both things are achieved. At the same time, there is a limit. Because, and now, when there is a need, like for instance, Mukundatta Prabhu is a good example. His mother was very, very upset that he joined Krishna consciousness. But anyways, when he was young, she was fine. She had a job and she was able to care for herself and this and that. But she did not like his Krishna consciousness. and she was very upset. He said something in a class here, over here, but I can't remember exactly. Something in reference to this. He always wanted to join a monastery. His mother was never happy with that. And then what? He ran away and his mom didn't know where he went or something like that, right? Okay, yeah. So he didn't even tell his mother where he was, and he just ran away. And then he says, but in the end of my life, I compensated for that. I kind of like, because his mom, she became ill, and he had to go and care for her. And when he cared for her, he cooked for her, he had the tape, he had, Prabhupada's chanting going on the whole time, he would read out to her. And before his mother passed away, she became a full-on devotee. She was so touched that her son was caring for her, and she knew that this was a very rare thing. Because most people, they just let their parents die. You put them in a senior living home, and that's it. And you earn, if you have some wealth, you put them in a nice senior living home. Actually, there's this place in Florida, just south of Orlando. What's that place called? The Villages. The Villages in what? It's a place. Anyways, it's just south of Orlando on the turnpike as you go to Miami. Huh? That's the Villages, and you have to pass by if you want to drive from Orlando to Miami on the turnpike. So, the Villages, and it's all old people, rich old people who are completely neglected by their children. They either have no offsprings, or basically they have offsprings, but it's like they don't have them. And they're all over there with these big houses, and they probably have some people to help them or care for them. And they're all miserable like anything. They all go it's a huge place, and it's very wealthy, very rich people. All who are going to die, and probably the government will take most of the wealth, or whatever. Or it'll be given to their dog. So his mother understood that he was not like that. And she could not attribute it to any other reason apart from the fact that he was Krishna conscious. That endeared her so much to Krishna conscious, she became a devotee also. She said, I thought my son didn't care for me. Where did he develop all this care? And what she thought would be care, which, maybe her son, and okay, mom, I'll do what you want me to do. I'll become a wealthy, good, tax-paying citizen and a proud son that you can go and boast to other, people about. She thought that was care. That wasn't care. So in this case, you can see how it plays out. It's not, the principle is that our Krishna consciousness takes precedence. Yet, there is a way of executing things where we're able to follow dharma to a large extent. Ultimately, nothing is perfect, but therefore these things have to be discussed in detail with, senior devotees and guides who can help us implement these things practically in our lives. Otherwise, one may go overboard also. And there's so many examples of that. In the name of affection, it's like, oh, my mom, and at least in India, my mom, she really wants me to eat onion and garlic, and she only loves me, she only cares for my health, and she wants me to, forget onion, garlic, eat meat, because she wants me to be a strong individual, and she's my mom, and she sacrificed so much for me. How can I refuse her request to eat meat? So I ate meat. That's stupidity. This is not affection. This is not caring. This is, oh, you see, my mom, I'm supposed to care for her feelings. No, not in this regard. If she gets upset because of this, okay. So this is the point, Okay, any other question? Yes, Janardhan?
You mentioned how peace is achieved through sacrifice, which means discomfort.
Sacrifice and austerity.
Sacrifice and austerity.
Austerity is acceptance of voluntary discomfort. Tapodivyam putrakayena sattvam shuddhed yasmad brahma saukyam tamanantam.
So this is like
Acceptance of voluntary acceptance of discomfort for the purpose of advancing in Krishna consciousness, not just voluntary acceptance of any discomfort. Like they have, right, they had this ice bucket challenge. Yeah, useless thing, because it doesn't make you Krishna conscious. Ice bucket challenge. And it was a big thing in the United States. A waste of time. You take a bucket of ice and you pour it on your head. So they have to do some stupid things like this. Yeah.
So discomfort is intrinsic within a piece. Like, is it, to what extent is that true? Discomfort is intrinsic
I said discomfort is intrinsic in sacrifice.
in sacrifice.
And performance of sacrifice yields one to get peace.
Okay.
Krishna Kish.
Prabhupada dealt in a very, very nice way. There is a story of Brahmananda Prabhu, Harishori Prabhu. Brahmananda Prabhu explained that at the time of initiation, his mother was sitting. Prabhupada said, first you pay obeisances to your mother,
Yeah.
and then come. And then Harishori Prabhu, when his mother and father visited the temple, he said, did you give prasadam? Harishori Prabhu said, no, somehow there was no
Right,
prasadam.
right.
Prabhupada said, no, you missed it. You should have given prasadam to your parents.
Yeah.
Prabhupada was caring for your parents, but I read in Hare Krishna Explosion yesterday, what is this? Haigriva Prabhu was writing, I have to go to home, I have to take care of my parents. Prabhupada directly rejects. He says, what is this? Your connection is with Krishna,
Yeah.
and this temporary attachment to your mother and parents will not take you anywhere.
Right.
Like that, Prabhupada cuts him, and then he comes to 22nd Avenue and arranges for the marriage, and then the life goes on. And I heard and we say we have to be very careful of the tears of the mother.
Yeah. Yeah.
So tears of the mother, their intrinsic Maya is there within those tears. Mother, in Indian languages, mother is called Ma. Ma means Maya. So mother is Maya in one sense. In other sense, the affection of Krishna's love is manifested a fraction or a glimpse of it is in mother's love. Prabhupada also said that's for the sake of example. But if you stretch the then we will be in Maya.
Yeah.
Father's affection is not so much, actually. Father, okay. Mother is too much,
Yeah.
And mother imposes also.
Mother is very attached. They don't give up so easily.
She's
Father
very
will give up.
Father,
Anyway,
forget it.
useless fellow. And they'll get
You have to
lost.
be careful of only mothers.
Yeah, mothers don't give up so easily. But that's again, yeah. Both things are there. Janardhan?
I just had a quick question. You mentioned that quote from the Prabhupada tape where he was talking about how this Krishna consciousness and this chanting isn't an artificial imposition on the mind. I always thought that meant that because like our eternal nature is actually as spirit souls.
Correct.
Not that we had been like chanting like other things throughout our many
Yeah,
lifetimes.
but the point is that, we are chanting other things all the time. And although we are not chanting the way we are chanting Hare Krishna, but the point, Krishna speaks in Bhagavad Gita, he says, Kathayantascha mam nityam. How does that verse begin? Tushyanti charamata. Machitta madgata prana bodhayantas parasparam kathayantascha mam nityam. Tushyanti charamanti cha. That those who are devotees of Krishna, they are machitta madgata prana, so those whose very life is Krishna. Krishna is their very life, means they're pure devotees, right? That's what we want to become. How are they? They are Kathayantascha mam nityam. They are always talking about Krishna. They cannot stop talking about Krishna. Prabhupada exhibited that. He would always talk about Krishna. Harishori, any Harishori Prabhu would explain. Any situation. Prabhupada would look at a tree and he'll connect it with Krishna. a squirrel and he'll give some instruction to his disciples. You know, so Prabhupada, Krishna consciousness is not an artificial imposition. But that means the aspects of Krishna consciousness are also not an artificial. It is not a spiritual world, you expect devotees to. But the point is, they are always talking about Krishna. And we are to chant Krishna's name and talk about Krishna. In the process that he's okay, he's given 16 rounds that we have to chant. We are in the association of go out and distribute Srila Prabhupada's books. There also we are talking about, we are doing it for Krishna. We are trying to get them connected to Krishna. It is for Krishna. It is about Krishna. So in this way, we are being trans that platform. Nick had something for you. Yeah.
So it's interesting how Prabhupada emphasizes peace as opposed to love, because it seems like for example, Mother Yashoda, in Ten Candles says she was always restless when she was thinking about Krishna. And the goal of chanting Hare Krishna necessarily mean that we should have peace. Is I thought we should chant so we could develop love for Krishna. So I was a little curious why, because when we chant, when we develop love for Krishna, naturally we get peace. Peace is a subsidiary of love for Krishna.
So that's the point.
So why does he not emphasize that in the purport? He seems like he puts more focus on peace as opposed to love.
I mean, Prabhupada is emphasizing in this purport because everybody is looking for peace. And Prabhupada is making the point that the peace, At that time it was more prominent. The second canto, this is. He was still in India. Yeah. So there's so much emphasis on peace in the world. And because there's so much emphasis on peace in the world, Prabhupada is making the point, you want peace, you'll get it. You want happiness, even happiness is a side product only, right? That's not our goal. Correct? But Prabhupada is saying, chant and be happy. And if you go really deep into the philosophy, what is that? Happiness to mom. Even if you break heart and leave me broken hearted by not being present before me. Happy? No. But the point is, happiness is a byproduct of being. So Prabhupada here is referring, become Krishna conscious. You want happiness, become Krishna conscious. Whether you have no desires, or whether you are akama, you are a pure devotee who wants to just please Krishna. Execute bhakti tivra with great intensity. Okay, Matu, anything? I'll come back to you.
I'm not 100% sure how to articulate my question clearly. But you were mentioning how, like, love requires, or sacrifice of our self-interest. And, like, we'll see, like, sometimes in, like, loving exchanges with devotees, for instance, like, there's that sacrifice of our self-interest in order to develop those relationships. But then what's the balance between, like, sacrificing our self-interest versus, like, that need for reciprocation? Because from my understanding, like, even developing love for Krishna, like you were mentioning in the Shikshastakam verse, like, it's not for the sake of looking for reciprocation, but we're learning how to develop that relationship and give just to give. But then when our needs aren't necessarily met, then, like, there's some dissonance that comes there too. So
it's not that devotee does not expect reciprocation from Krishna. Does expect reciprocation from Krishna. And to expect reciprocation from Krishna is not antithetical to pure devotional service. Right? The point is, even if you don't reciprocate, and the point is, This is a statement of, it's a very esoteric statement, right? And the point is, it's a statement of a lover to a beloved. In this case, the highest lover, rather, Srimati Dharani, to her beloved. But it is not, it is said, but it is not that there is not expected. Okay, I don't care whether you reciprocate or not. No, I care whether you reciprocate or not. I will still be your maidservant. But I still feel bad that you're not reciprocating. Kind of meaning, and it's a lot more esoteric than what I have said, and I'm to understand how esoteric that gets. Reciprocation from Krishna, and in fact, devotee does want reciprocation from Krishna. Otherwise, what? Okay. So now, in terms of balance of interest, there are certain things that devotees should also learn. For instance, in the name of developing relationships with devotees should not, in some cases, there may be a need. One not be very rigid, but at the same time, one should overall see that one is able to chant one rounds, one is able to read, one is able to get the rest that one needs. All these things. Because without these things, we are also, in one sense, neglecting the order of the spiritual master. Now, you care for them, you didn't have time. You may have to compensate rounds for the next day because it was an emergency, or other way. But exceptions need to remain exceptions. But if the exception becomes a rule in the name of maintaining relationships, then our devotional service goes for a toss. Am I making some sense here? So that's not being selfish. That should not be construed as not being engaged in sacrifice. There is sacrifice there because that is order of spiritual master, and you understand that you need to do these things to stay in Krishna consciousness. And to stay in Krishna consciousness is the desire of the spiritual master, apart from our own desire, but it's a desire of the spiritual master, and therefore that is also sacrifice. Not sacrifice, because it is sacrifice. Too much of that means you're not doing other services. Anyways, you get the point. Right? Okay. Tyrese, have anything? Yeah. It's probably your time, but yeah.
I was reading last week on TSKP about I was reading in the Bhagavatam about when Lord Brahma performed penance, and Lord Krishna told him to do it, and he told him that he was the one that told him to do it. And in the purport it says that the penance is the internal potency of the Lord and is non-different from him. So I thought that was relevant to the class we were talking about.
Penance is okay. All right.
You got something to
Thank you. Hare Krishna. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha patitanam bhavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo